Hi, I'm Dr. Tiffany Rao, and this is the third and final webinar in the SEL coaching webinar series. The first was social emotional coaching. It starts with you. And the second was co-regulation and SEL focused teaching habits. These webinars focus on enacting the role of an SEL coach in the classroom, and they are geared toward teachers. My background is in special education, but the principles and practices that I am sharing are applicable to all teachers at all grade levels. And so here we are at the third of the series of 3 webinars, and this one is called How to Enact the Role of SEL Coach. If you haven't watched the first 2, I do recommend watching them first because this one, they are really foundational to this one and to being able to successfully enact the role of SEL coach in your classroom. So here is the QR code to the slides. If you would like to access them, you can pause this webinar and go ahead and pull that up and save it for yourself in case you want to refer back to it later. All right, so we are moving away from the antiquated concept of behavior management being something that is founded in control. That was essentially kind of saying, I'm the teacher, I'm the boss, therefore you students need to be quiet, listen to me, do what I say, and behave yourself. This approach, the more sort of traditional approach that we saw in the past, teaches little more than compliance veiled as respect, and mainly serves to please a teacher who may primarily be focused on maintaining power and control. In my first webinar of this series, I talked about sometimes how we come to that place of really trying to control student behavior because we get a lot of messages that it's a reflection on the teacher. And that can then play into how we approach behavior management. So the first webinar really focuses on facing some of the subconscious thoughts and ideas and beliefs and judgments that we have about student behavior or expression of big emotions, and thinking and reflecting about how that might be negatively impacting our effectiveness with students. So in contrast to that, an SEL-centered approach teaches students the skills that they need to manage their emotions in a healthy way, rather than stuff them down to avoid punishment or get into this battle for control. It teaches students to be competent at self-management, responsible decision-making, social awareness, etc., because research shows that students who learn these competencies have better relationships, do better at school, and are more successful in the workplace as adults. The examples I'm going to share in this webinar are more geared toward the elementary level, but the steps can absolutely be applied at any level from preschool through young adulthood. So I shared this in the first webinar, but let's revisit it. What is a coach? From the Cambridge English Dictionary, it is someone whose job is to teach people to improve at a sports, skill, or school subject. Teaching is focused on the acquisition of new knowledge and skills, and also the mastery of new knowledge and skills, while coaching is focused on refining and developing knowledge and skills. I like the term coach when it comes to social emotional learning, because social emotional learning is really not something that we could ever say we've mastered. We will always need to grow in our social and emotional competence whenever we are faced with a new environment or a new situation. If we were to change jobs or move to a different country or any number of life changes, we're going to have to learn self-management, self-awareness, new social awareness, and all of those SEL competencies. We're going to have to work at that all over again to get good at them like we were before, when things were more familiar and we had a lot of practice at it. So likewise, we would not expect for any of our students to master social emotional competencies. For one thing, and I've mentioned this a lot in the other two webinars, our brains are not finished developing until age 25. So we would not expect mastery of these competencies at any level. What we are aiming for is continual development and refinement and improvement. So the characteristics of effective social emotional coaches are the following. They are aware of emotions in themselves and their students, even when they are at a low intensity. They use emotional moments as an opportunity to connect and teach effective regulation instead of shaming a student for emotional outbursts. They can see things from a student's perspective and validate how the student feels. When a student expresses emotions, the coach or teacher helps them to verbally label them, and they problem solve with the student, setting limits, discussing goals, and finding strategies to deal with the situation that caused the negative emotion. I developed this model of social emotional coaching from a number of different sources on parenting, as well as KSEL.org, and a lot of what I've learned from KSEL.org, which is really a leading organization in social emotional learning in schools. But I also consulted the work of the Gottman Institute, specifically emotion coaching for parents. So all of this has been sort of adapted and adjusted to be applicable for schools and the context of classrooms and the teacher-student interaction. So a few don'ts before I go into the steps of social emotional coaching. Don't tell a child how they should feel. Don't criticize or shame negative emotions. This actually interferes with emotional development. Do not dismiss feelings. Don't be impatient. This is not a quick fix. This is an investment, but it is a very worthwhile investment. Don't expect immediate results, and don't make negative assumptions about the purpose of their behavior. I talk more about why these approaches are problematic in the first webinar. But punishment is where you can expect immediate results. Punishment is where you don't have to be very patient, because punishment does tend to work to stop a behavior. And so that's why we keep going back to it. But in the long run, it can actually make things worse, or it can make the child's mental health worse, to where they are now acting out of a place of fear of punishment instead of a place of social connection and connectedness with an adult that they trust and they respect, and from a place of calm. So I am not saying that there should be no consequences and that students should be allowed to just behave however they want and do whatever they want. I would never suggest that. They need our guidance. They do need our teaching and our support, but from a framework of support, validation, coaching, teaching them what to do instead. So now I'll tell you what to do. I'm going to go over 5 steps to SEL coaching in general, and then I'm going to give you some specific examples and how you would apply these steps to these student examples. So here they are just listed, and then I will go into more detail. Number 1, notice emotions in self and students. Number 2, listen with empathy and attunement. Number 3, acknowledge, validate, and label. Number 4, begin problem solving. And number 5, teach coping skills. So a little more on each of those. Noticing and allowing yourself and your students to feel emotions. This is the healthy alternative to shutting down emotions or stuffing them down. And this allows you to co-regulate effectively. The second webinar in this series was all about co-regulation. So that's where you can get an idea of how to do that and what that means. Essentially, it is coming from a place of calm rather than joining in the student's chaos. So when you stay calm, you are actually, just by staying calm by itself and regulating yourself, you are helping that student to regulate. Even if you did nothing more than that, you still should and need to do more than that, but that alone can be very effective. If you are not regulated, you'll need to take steps to regulate. If one of your students is becoming dysregulated, you can address the issue sooner rather than later when the emotions have completely unraveled. So you want to get really good at noticing students' emotions before their behavior unravels so that you can swoop in and follow these steps, and it will go a lot smoother earlier on. In terms of how to regulate while teaching, again, watch the second webinar where I give you several ideas of how to do that and how to help students regulate as well. Number 2, so you've noticed that a student has maybe a simmering emotion that might escalate. Now you want to listen with empathy and attunement. You're going to try to mirror the student's emotions. You shouldn't do this at the same level as the student. So again, we don't want to join in their chaos. This is a controlled effort on your part to show empathy. So if the student is angry, you can reflect a small bit of empathetic anger in your facial expression, not disapproving anger, but the student is angry and, oh, he took your toy. Oh my gosh, sort of a thing. If the student is sad, you can reflect that in your voice and expression. Oh, what happened over the weekend? And just kind of reflect that just a little bit. Number 3 is acknowledge, validate, and label. You do not have to agree with how they are feeling. You may very well think inside of your head, oh my gosh, this kid is making way too big of a deal, or I don't think they should be crying about this. Notice if you're having those thoughts and challenge them with an alternative thought, such as, well, it's a big deal to them right now in this moment, okay? But you can still acknowledge and validate even if you don't really agree. So here's what that might look like. It looks like you're mad because recess is over. It makes sense that you would feel angry or disappointed. Recess is so fun. And this helps the child turn upsetting feelings into definable and normalized experiences. So naming the emotion and behavior without judgment might look like, I could tell you were upset because you turned away from the school, crossed your arms, and you have a frown on your face. You can say this very matter of fact. You're not judging, you're not putting them down or criticizing, you're just observing and labeling. This is a powerful way to teach students to accept their emotions. When we can accept our emotions and feel them without getting too stuck on them, that's where the empowerment comes. We can feel them and then ride them out and move on with our day versus stewing on them because somebody dismissed them or invalidated them, and now we're even more angry. And doing this also strengthens your connection with the student. And then step 4, you're going to begin problem solving. You want to ask questions in a non-judgmental way. In the recess example, you might ask, what were you doing right before the bell rang? Oh, that sounds fun. I bet that was a lot of fun. It's such a bummer when fun things have to stop for now. So still validating every step of the way. And then can you think of anything that would make it easier for you to come inside from recess? And maybe they have an idea. If they don't, you can share ideas. You can do this in the moment, or you can do it later if the child is not ready. If they're still kind of angry and they just need a little bit of space, that's fine. You can come back and finish the conversation later. And then step 5, you want to teach coping skills. So for anger, a common and effective coping skill is deep breathing. You can teach this by doing it together and also modeling it yourself when you are under stress. And then reappraising is also effective. This involves teaching students how to kind of reappraise the situation, redefine how you're looking at it. It's different from just a quick, you're fine. Instead, it looks like, I can feel sad about this, but it doesn't have to ruin my day. You can teach this best by modeling it often. So let's go over an example. This first example is tackling. Jeremy is an 8-year-old boy who often runs toward his peers and slams into them or tackles them to the ground. He laughs when he does this, but his peers do not like it. His teacher, Ms. Folsom, and his parents are concerned about this behavior as someone could get hurt and it's interfering with Jeremy making friends. So step 1, it's time for Ms. Folsom to notice emotions in herself and in Jeremy. So Ms. Folsom might notice tension rising as inside of herself as Jeremy once again tackles another student. She's worried someone could get hurt. She's also frustrated and angry that Jeremy keeps doing this even after she has told him not to. She notices in herself a strong desire to punish Jeremy so he learns a lesson. And Miss Folsom notices Jeremy is laughing, an indication that Jeremy is enjoying the behavior. So she then feels further anger that Jeremy is laughing while doing this unsafe behavior. She notices judgmental thoughts pop up, such as, what a brat, and I bet he just wants attention. I went over these kinds of thoughts that pop up for us in the first webinar. So Ms. Folsom recognizes he is not yet ready, or that she is not yet ready for step 2, listening with empathy and attunement. So she steps in and says, Jeremy, I cannot let you tackle. Somebody could get hurt. I need you to sit down here while I take some deep breaths. Then let's talk about how you're feeling. You can squeeze this big pillow until I get back, and Mr. Klein will be here to make sure you are safe. Or you can use any kind of distraction that might work for a couple of minutes, as long as everybody's safe. So Mrs. Folsom notices she's angry. She's having these very negative kind of judgmental thoughts about Jeremy, which means she's not ready to listen to Jeremy and really tune into him. She needs to regulate herself first. So that's what she's going to do. Now, by saying this, I need you to sit here so I can take some deep breaths. She is modeling self-regulation to Jeremy. So it's okay that she's angry and frustrated, because this is actually an opportunity to model self-regulation in the moment. So she steps away for 2 or 3 minutes of deep breathing. She shows herself compassion in dealing with this stressful event. I talked about that in the first webinar. She challenges assumptions she's having about student behavior, such as he should know better, he's being a brat, and reminds herself that Jeremy is attempting to meet his need for something. Maybe it's social interaction or large motor input. So this, I would say, this example is maybe more of a special education example. because as special educators, we're pretty tuned in to understanding the function behind behavior, that sometimes it's sensory, sometimes it's social, etc. So now she's ready, right? She reminds herself, all right, he's trying to get a need met, and she's already got a couple of hypotheses going. It might be for social interaction, or it might be for large motor input. Maybe he is seeking that tackling feeling, those big body feelings. That's a thing for some young students. So the teacher says, hey, Jeremy, how are you feeling right now? Jeremy says, great. The teacher says, it looks like you were having fun tackling Damon. Was that fun for you? Jeremy says, yeah, I love playing with my friends like I'm a football player. Teacher, I can see how that would be fun for you. Do you like football? Jeremy jumps up. I love football. Teacher, wow, you sure do. So she's mirroring a little bit of his excitement. And by the way, this example I'm giving you right now is, let's say that Jeremy can actually name his feelings. I will also go over this if he's not very verbal in terms of naming his feelings. So yes, here is that example now. So now let's say Jeremy's not a very talkative guy, or he is not very in tune with his feelings, or he's got maybe an expressive language delay. Teacher says, hey, Jeremy, how are you feeling right now? And Jeremy's silent. Maybe he shrugs. Teacher says, when you tackled Damon, you were laughing. That tells me you were having fun. Were you having fun trying to play with Damon? Jeremy, yeah. Teacher, it's fun to play with our friends, isn't it? Do you like to tackle or play rough sometimes? Does that feel good to your body? He says, yeah. So next, it's time to acknowledge, validate, and label. So first, she listened with empathy and attunement, even in the example where Jeremy wasn't saying very much. She was kind of at least trying to have that exchange with him. So the teacher says, it is fun to play with friends, doing something that you love like football. And it's fun to do things that feel good to our bodies. Jeremy says, yeah, football's so fun. And I want to be Damon's friend. I want to play like the kids at recess who play football. And again, validation. Teacher says, I could tell you're having fun because you were smiling and laughing. This is increasing Jeremy's own self-awareness by modeling it and kind of giving him the words and the labels and connecting it to his facial expression and his actions. So now it's time to begin problem solving. The teacher says, I love to see you having fun and I want you to have fun. But it didn't look like Damon was having fun. Damon's face got red and he yelled, stop. How do you think Damon was feeling? And Jeremy says, mad. The teacher says, yes, that's great that you can name Damon's feeling. I agree, he seemed mad. And I was also worried because it's not safe to tackle in the classroom like that. I was afraid someone could get hurt. That's why I stepped away to take deep breaths. Next time you want to play with a friend, what do you think might help you do that in a safer way? And maybe Jeremy says, not tackling. The teacher says, yes, definitely not tackling. We've talked about that, right? But I still want you to have fun with friends. Is there anything safe you can think of that you could do in the classroom to have fun with friends when you get that urge? Jeremy says, maybe a high five. The teacher says, great idea. And what about asking a friend to sit down and read a book about football together? I know Jamie likes football too, and we could get some football books from the library tomorrow. So the teacher is recognizing the underlying need, or at least her best guess at what the underlying need is. And that seems to be on target, that he's seeking social interaction. He wants to be like the kids at recess that play football. So she's addressing that need. Now, maybe these solutions wouldn't work for every classroom, right? Kids can't necessarily just have fun with friends whenever they get the urge, but we can think about how to meet that need in a way that is appropriate to the classroom. So let's say it seems more like it's a motor need, a large motor need. So the teacher says, does it feel good to your body to do big things where your whole body is involved? Jeremy says, yeah. The teacher says, well, I want you to do what your body needs, but we have to be safe. Can you think of another big body activity where nobody could get hurt? Jeremy says, run around. The teacher says, that's one idea, but we can't do that in the classroom. Do you see that beanbag over there? Would you like to fall into it sometimes if your body feels like it needs a big body activity? So again, you got to figure out what's going to be safe and what's going to work. You would definitely want to make sure if you use the beanbag activity that there's nothing nearby that he could bump his head on. Just use those basic principles of safety. Sometimes in a classroom, particularly like a special education classroom, they might have a sensory area, or they might be able to take a student out to swing on the swings for 2 minutes, because that helps some students get a little more organized in their bodies and pay attention better when they get back. That's not always an option, but you can really get creative. And if you are a general ed teacher, I would reach out to one of the special ed teachers on your campus if this type of behavior is happening in your classroom, and you could get some ideas and consult them as a resource. All right, so step 5, teach coping skills. The teacher says, all right, well, next time you want to tackle, you can come up to me and say, I want to play with friends. Then I can help you with that. Or she might offer, next time you want to tackle, you can say to yourself, I want to tackle, but this isn't football time. I'll look at my list of safe friendship activities. I made a list of ideas and we can keep adding to it. Or next time you want to tackle, you can say to yourself, I need to do a big body activity. I'll look at my list of big body choices. Here is a list of safe ways to do that. I'm not suggesting that the teacher would say all of these things at once. Just go with one of them to start with. And then you want to follow up. You want to keep tabs on how it's going from your own observations, and then check in with the student on how it's going. Some ideas that you came up with might be unrealistic or might be problematic. You didn't see it ahead of time, but it's not working, or it's not actually meeting the underlying need. So it might be necessary to repeat the steps or repeat the problem-solving step, at least until an effective plan is in place. And the student may continue to need those statements of validation until, so to speak, their cup has been filled. Okay, here is another example, a different example. In this example, the student refuses to work. So Brianna is a 6th grade student who does not complete any work during math. She enjoys ELA, but math is non-preferred and she doesn't complete it. While Mr. Miller is teaching, she tries to play games on her school iPad, emails her friends, draws, or makes origami, and she leaves her classwork blank. Okay, so first of all, I am not arguing that SEL coaching is going to fix this behavior all the time. It would be important to rule out any kind of learning problems, and you should probably schedule a student study team meeting, and an assessment plan might even be needed. But in the meantime, you can talk to and approach this from a social emotional perspective, because maybe Brianna's just not doing her work because she doesn't like it. We don't know if it's too hard, if it's not hard enough. That's why the student study team meeting would really be necessary here. But let me just give you this example as well. So step 1, notice emotions in self and student. Mr. Miller notices his own frustrations about Brianna's refusal to complete math work. He notices judgments such as Brianna's being lazy or Brianna might be having difficulty in her home life. And he worries about Brianna's future if she cannot do basic math. Even using the word refusal could be seen as a judgment because we don't really know fully what's going on. So Mr. Miller notices those thoughts and frustrations and judgments and challenges them by reminding himself that Brianna is not normally lazy. And even if she didn't complete any work in any subject, it could mean something else entirely. He remembered that her family is also concerned about this issue and that he should not make assumptions about her home life, especially when he has no evidence. His job is to support Brianna in her schoolwork. He validates his frustrations and concerns about Brianna's future, knowing that he cares about his students, and he feels more ready now to move to the next step, noticing Brianna's emotions. He's having a hard time, though, reading her emotions. She seems happy. When she doesn't seem happy, it seems in line with maybe like typical adolescent mood swings and brooding. During math, she still seems happy until he redirects her to stop playing an iPad game and pay attention. She doesn't like being redirected from a fun activity to her least favorite subject. So she groans and rolls her eyes as she puts her iPad away and then frowns until math is over. Then she walks out to PE, which is right after math, smiling again. So after math, Mr. Miller asks Brianna to stay back from PE to talk for step 2. He says, "Hey, Brianna, how are you doing?" She says, "Fine." He says, "When I asked you to put your iPad away today, you looked unhappy, and I noticed you didn't complete any of the classwork." She says, "Yeah." "I remember you told me that you don't like math. Can you tell me more about that?" And she says, "It's boring and pointless." So he had this conversation. He's listening without judgment. He's attuned to her. Now it's step 3, acknowledge, validate, and label. He says, "Okay, you find math boring and pointless. Is it frustrating too?" She says, "Yeah, exactly." He goes, "I get that. I enjoy math, but I know there are a lot of people who don't. Since you feel like math is pointless, then do you feel like it's pointless to complete the work?" She says, "Pretty much." He says, "Yeah, I wouldn't want to do something I find pointless either. How does it feel when you complete math work?" And she says, "It's the worst. I want to run away." He says, "You feel like you want to just escape?" She says, "Yep." So now it's time to begin problem solving. He says, "I'm concerned about your math grade, but more than that, I want you to learn the basic math skills that you'll need as you get older. For when it's time to budget your money and save up for a car and keep your bank account balanced, things like that. I know math can be boring, but we do need to use it in order to have a good life." So he is sharing his concerns. His concerns are valid, and she feels math is pointless. So he's kind of coming at it from this angle of reminding her the real life experiences that we do need math for. Brianna says, "Yeah, I know. That's what my mom said too." And so he says, "Well, can you think of anything that might make math more interesting?" Brianna said, "I liked the game that we played last month. And my mom got me a video game she said teaches math skills, and that's fun." So he says, "Okay, great. I can definitely incorporate more games into math. That's an excellent idea. Thank you for that." So she is sharing with him her learning style, which is playful. She needs to be, at least for math, she doesn't like it. So it needs to feel playful in order for her to feel more engaged and be willing to engage. This is great feedback, and this is a great idea that would likely benefit a lot of the students in class. So, maybe Mr. Miller just needs to spend a little more focus on making his lessons more engaging and incorporating some math games. That might not be all that is necessary here, but it's a great conversation and it's a great start. So the teacher says, "Can you think of anything else that would help you complete the classwork?" And she says, "Well, yeah, I can never get your attention to help me when I need help." So he says, oh, really? Gosh, I didn't realize that. Okay, I will make sure that I'm checking in with you and giving you the help you need during independent work. Thanks for letting me know about that. And then Brianna says, and when you assign homework, it takes me like 2 hours to finish. And I have soccer practice, plus I just want to chill out. So he says, well, I definitely don't want you spending 2 hours on math homework. How about for now, you don't have to do any math homework except for maybe play 15 minutes of a math video game. Otherwise, let's have you work on paying more attention during math at school and completing at least half of the classwork. Does that sound like a plan? And she says, yeah. So this is a starting point, right? She's going from completing almost no classwork, and I don't know if she's doing her homework, but it's 2 hours is too much anyways. So he's just, let's start from zero and let's just see if she can try to focus a little bit more and complete half the classwork. And then in turn, he's going to try to make it more fun, and he's going to make sure he is clued into her so that he gives her the help that she needs. So now it's time for coping skills. He says, next time you need help with math, be sure to raise your hand and make eye contact with me. Then I will be sure to go to you next. And if you start feeling like you want to escape math, I want you to try taking deep breaths and tell yourself, I got this. Do you think that you could try that and let me know if it helps? And then I also have, this is a sensory approach. I also have this Velcro that I'm going to put inside your desk. Sometimes it helps to fidget with something when it's hard to pay attention. See if it helps you. You can scratch it and touch it while I'm teaching. So the Velcro is this kind of an OT sensory fidget approach, and you could use it for any student. It's very discreet. So basically you would just take stick-on Velcro, like a strip, and attach it, stick it on the inside of their desk on the top, but like underneath the top, so that they can, or on the bottom, I guess, so that the student can have their hand in their desk and they're sort of touching and playing with the Velcro. For some students, this helps them pay better attention. I like the Velcro approach because it is typically quiet. As long you have to use the soft side of the Velcro, the harder side would be a little more noisy. It is quiet and it is discreet and it is not distracting. Some of the fidget toys can also be effective, but sometimes they can be more distracting than they are helpful. So this is one way to kind of start and just see if it might improve her focus a little bit. Maybe not, but sometimes it can. All right, so those are the two examples that I shared today, and here are my references. Thank you so much for joining me for this series, and I thank you for being here and investing this time in yourself and in your professional development.